from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast Network. I'm Reverend Charles Harrison, and on this episode today, we're going to be talking about the protests that are happening on college campus across the country concerning the war in Gaza between the Israelis and the Palestinians and its impact here in America. Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast Network, and I'm Reverend Charles Harrison. And today I have a special guest with me, and we're going to be talking about what is the hot topic, certainly of this week and really last week, and that is the protests that are on college campuses across the country concerning the war in Israel or Gaza between Israel and Hamas, and the casualties that this war is causing among the Palestinian people, which is creating a lot of protests across the world, particularly the protests that are happening here in America are happening on college campuses. And this is creating a lot of tension. It has been politicized. And I have with me today a good friend, a special guest who's been on this podcast a number of times, Pastor Richard Willoughby, who is the pastor of the Promised Land Christian Community Church. Pastor Willoughby, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Well,
let's talk a little bit about this because, and we'll go into, everything that is kind of happening and quotes and the impact that this seems to have, on our political race. Yesterday, the President of the United States, President Biden, came out and did a short press conference and kind of addressed this issue of what was going on the college campuses. And what President Biden said is that everybody has the right to free speech, that everyone has a right to voice their, opinions in a peaceful way about what's going on, in this country and anywhere in the world. And he said, as long as it's peaceful, then it is allowable in this country, which is known for peaceful protests. But he said it crosses the line when it becomes violent, when it is on private property, and it prevents others from either going to class or when it creates fear and anxiety in people based on what the protest is about. I kind of want to get your feel as to where you are with all of this concern about the war in Israel that's taking place in Gaza, this whole issue between Hamas and what was done by Hamas that people say really created and caused this war to take place, and they're taking of hostages, and then would some say the response of Israel. Some say Israel has gone too far. Others say they haven't. But what is your take on all of this?
Well, Pastor Harrison, I'm trying to think. It just came to my mind. AIPAC is a organization that supports Jews and stands behind Israel. And me and another one of your friends, Pastor Moore, and my wife and his wife, we were able to go over to Israel. And because the AIPAC was concerned about us having a black president, whether or not we would, the blacks or African Americans would be pro-Palestinian. And so they flew us over there first class, and we stayed over there almost a week. And we met with, at that time, it was the PLO. And we got to meet this Netanyahu that's probably in power right now. And so when I look at these protests and I think about what I saw myself with my own eyes, they are going a little bit too far. Some people are comparing these protests to what Martin Luther King was doing when he was doing peaceful protests, and I think that's a little bit too much because we were being attacked and while we protest, and these people these protesters are attacking private property. So I think they're going a little bit too far, and they got a misunderstanding, a lack of wisdom of how a protest should be. And I agree it should be a peaceful protest, and I know they are very much upset about what's going on in Israel, but the difference between this protest and January, I heard somebody compare it to January the 6th. January the 6th was a protest against our government. What they're protesting is happening in another country. There's all kind of different perspectives where you can look at that. And I think they're going a little bit too far, and they need to calm down and stop destroying property.
Well, one of the things that Reverend Al Sharpton said yesterday that really caught a lot of people's attention is that he compared the pro-Palestinian protests currently taking place on college campuses to the January 6th, 2021 Capitol insurrection. And accusing Democrats of having a double standard when it comes to the demonstrations. And he says that any time what you are protesting for becomes secondary to what you are doing, then you're really not protesting for it, and you're in many ways dramatizing what Al Sharpton said. And he really says is that the protest itself has caused the attention to be on the protest rather than on what they're protesting about. So in his mind, and there are some comparisons being made, and it's the moral issue. Al Sharpton says the protests have lost the moral high ground, and because of that, in his mind, there are similarities between January 6th and what the white nationalists did in Charlottesville, with their chants of blood and soil and their racist and anti-Semitic slogans. So the question, that I asked, that is anti-Semitism, should it get the same kind of outreach or outcry, that we give when there are white racist protests against blacks and other ethnic groups in the country? Does it rise to the same level when we have these protests that tend to become anti-Semitic, and some of them will say, well, it's not anti-Semitic. We're protesting what the Israeli government is doing to innocent women and children in Palestine. Well, we understand that, but is it being done in a way that makes Jewish students feel afraid on campus for their own safety when some of the language tends to be pretty vile and tends to be anti-Semitic?
Yeah, I will agree with Al Sharpton. It's the narrative that makes the difference. I will 100% say that they are wrong in the way they are doing it, and if they're making statements, and they are anti-Semitic, and that's why I know they are, because when we were over there, we actually met with the PLO. I mean, they were looking at us across a table. We could touch them.
So y'all met with them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we actually met with them. And they told us from the cradle to the grave, they teach their people to hate the Israelites.
Wow.
they start from the cradle to the grave. And they said if the United States is ignorant enough to give us some money thinking we're going to find peace, it ain't never happening.
Wow.
That come out of their own mouth.
Wow.
And you can call Pastor Moore. We all heard it. Everybody in the group, they said that there was about 10 of us. There was a pastor from Chicago. We was from all over the United States. AIPAC sent us over there. You can check with AIPAC. I'm saying they said they teach hatred from the cradle to the grave. Now, is it ever going to get worked out? And so these people that are protesting in the United States need to do it from the correct perspective. They need to know the backstory and the narratives that exist. We visited people's houses. When they build houses, they build them with a bunker, a bombing bunker. Little kids even knew what to do when they heard a siren. They knew to go to the bunker. They are raised like this from babies. They know what's going on. So now, with all of these different narratives, see, people are too politicizing this in a political way when I have to view it from a Christian perspective and from a theological way. I know God has said Israel is the chosen people. With that in my Christianity perspective, I don't know what's really the 100% answer. But for people to compare it to what Donald Trump did on January the 6th and all of that, and what Martin Luther King, when we was fighting for civil rights, that's the wrong way to look at it. There might be some infiltrators. There's always infiltrators in the groups that have an agenda. They may not even care whether you a Palestinian or a Jew. They got their own agenda. And that's what we have to be careful of. There are people that just hate in this country, and they might be stirring up the mess. If they really did an investigation and interviewed somebody that said, I'm doing this for the Palestinians, or I'm doing this for the Israelites, or I'm doing this for the Jews, have they really interviewed? Do we really have the real story?
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and my special guest today is Reverend Richard Willoughby, who is a good friend of mine and who is a prominent pastor in the city of Indianapolis. Pastor Willoughby, one of the things that came out of the arrests that have been made both at Columbia University and UCLA is that they have discovered that some of the people who have been arrested are professional protesters who go who go from one protest to the next, and they know how to do it. They know how to stir up the crowd. And I think there seems to be a concern about that, and also a concern about what some of the professors are indoctrinating the students with, because some of the students, it seemed like, were not fully aware of what was going on. They were there to protest, but they didn't seem to have all of the knowledge, and information about, what was really going on. And I think that is concerning. And there are those who are concerned about what's being taught now at our universities in indoctrinating our young people, and the ability of people to infiltrate, which is what you talked about, these protests and movement that is moving in a direction that sometimes seems not just anti-Israel, but anti-American.
Right. And that's where I'm coming from. Some of these kids, that's why I'm glad I'm a graduate of Martin University, because Martin University has a style of teaching of what they call andragogy. In our universities in the United States, it's pedagogy. They teach you to pass a test. They indoctrinate. That's the way they educate us, and it is indoctrinate us. You really haven't been taught. But at Martin University, we learn together. and we learn from each other. In our universities and IU and all these other, they use pedagogy. They got a book and they teach from a book and they think the book is right. And some of the stuff they're teaching is incorrect because they don't even teach Black history in our schools like they should. They teach Black history like it's separate from American history.
Right.
And Black history should be just as much part of the U.S. history or American history as anything else because we're part of this country.
Right.
And so you're correct. And that's all I'm talking about is infiltrators, people that have a separate agenda. These young people, most of the time, are uneducated. They're in the process of being educated. So they don't have the whole story. And they, like somebody, I'm 68 years old, so I've lived a few days and been through a few things and hopefully have a little wisdom about it. But they don't have the wisdom. They should not be tearing up anything.
Right.
It's okay to protest, but you should not be stopping people from going to class. They should not be making me feel like that I may not live the next day or whatever. They should not be putting all this anxiety on people. It's okay to protest what you think is right and wrong. That's why we have an issue with kids understanding why they should vote and all of that. We got all kind of things going on in this country. And this is major, and they need to stop. The law needs to do their job. Not harshly. Don't be beating nobody up and breaking their necks and all of that. But the law needs to be enforced. They're wrong in what they're doing and the way they're doing it.
With the January 6th, protest that led to an attack on the Capitol, Reverend Willoughby, the FBI got involved in that. They got involved in it, and they discovered several groups that were involved in it, far-right extreme groups like the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys that I didn't know anything about them until then, and the Three Percenters. All of those were involved. The FBI got involved. A little over 1,100 people were charged with something because of that. Some people saying that the standard is different now. In the sense that the FBI does not seem to be involved in what's going on these college campuses in these anti-Semitic protests, that some Jews have been injured, because of that. Certainly a lot of property has been destroyed. Do you think the FBI should be involved in this if there's infiltrators from the Middle East or outside these college campuses that are stirring this up and causing this? What is your feeling on that?
Yeah, I think they should be involved. Listen, I know for a fact, and you probably know also, that the first meeting of the Black Panthers, they had an infiltrator. The first meeting of the Black Panthers, they had already begun the investigation of our people. Why aren't they doing the same thing now? I think they should be, if they did the Black Panthers the way they did them, why are these people running free, all these groups you just mentioned? How come they're not infiltrated? How come we don't have more information? We should know exactly where the leaders of all these groups are right now. We ought to know where, if he's drinking coffee at Dunkin's Donuts right now, we ought to know that's where he is on 15th Street. We ought to know where he is because he's the one causing the trouble in the United States. And we need to protect democracy at all costs. What are we going to have if we don't have democracy? And they should treat them the same way they treated the Black Panthers, the same way they treated Martin Luther King. They knew they were watching Martin Luther King. I did a survey when I was in college. Like I said, they need to learn get some real education. They've been watching Martin Luther King ever since he was 16 years old. Now, that's how long they watched Martin Luther King, from the age of 16, and I can prove that. And so they need to treat this the way they used to treat us.
Well,
they know how to do it.
They
did it before. They can do it again.
Rev Willoughby, what would you say, though? Because part of the problem is we have provided scholarships for a lot of Palestinian students, and they have paid their way. Many others have paid their way to be here, or someone has. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it is the Palestinian students who are now here in America on these college campuses, and they have formed their own groups who are a part of this protest. Some are calling for those who are deeply involved for their visas to be taken and sent back home, because they think it's some of it seems to be pro-Hamas, more so than pro-Palestinian. That they're in some of the campuses, they took down the American flag and put up the Palestinian flag. Should we go that far as a country and remove those students that are instigating this kind of anti-Semitism in this country and on college campuses? What do you think?
I want you to know you're talking to a veteran.
Okay. Okay.
You're talking to a veteran, and when you go through boot camp, they train you to not have no fear, and you are willing to die for your country. So when I went to the hospital the other day and I saw that they had the flag, didn't have it in the middle, I said something to the officer about the American flag. If you got nerve enough to take down an American flag and hang up a Palestinian flag, you need to go home. Okay.
They need to go home.
Go on home. Get on away from here. Don't a country that I'm willing to die for, and listen, but not willing to even stand up for all of my rights. But yet I joined the Navy and would have died if it called up on it, because I'm a real veteran. Some people, like right now, then I know I would have died. Right now, I might think about it for about 5 minutes,
Right.
I'm a veteran. You cannot destroy the American flag in this country and expect me to support you.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and my special guest is Reverend Richard Willoughby, Sr. Reverend Willoughby, what do you think the answer is? What would you advise these young college students and those who are concerned about what's going on in Gaza? And certainly there are some legitimate concerns. War is ugly, and when there is a war, unfortunately, innocent people get caught in the middle of it, and that's just the reality and the tragedy of war. So when we can't avoid it, we should avoid it, but there are times when we do go to war, and sadly, innocent people are killed. What would you say to those who are concerned about what's going on in Gaza and all the reports that we hear about all of the innocent people being killed? I'm not for sure that all of them are innocent Palestinians. I think probably a lot of them are soldiers that have been killed, that they're putting in that number of innocent people, because certainly Israel has degraded their army. Well,
I have some of my mentors are like Julia Carson and Glenn Howard and Bill Crawford. And one thing Bill Crawford used to always say, and Julia Carson, is always get all the facts. Make sure you have the facts. Don't operate out of an incorrect position. Know if you're going to protest something, at least know what you're protesting.
Wow.
And then they need to listen to the voice of wisdom. If they're going to protest, it has to be peaceful. You cannot be breaking the laws of the United States. Now, I understand there's some bad police and there's bad in everything.
Right.
That's probably in the 1 to 3%. But most of the people that are protecting our country or good people. And they need to listen to the voice of wisdom. They need to sit down and talk about what it is they're for and against, and what is their agenda. What do they want out of this? It ain't like you're going to make Netanyahu do nothing. You ain't going to make this country do nothing. Not doing it the way they doing it.
Right.
People will listen to you if you calmly talk about it and sit across the, because listen, even the PLO, we let them make their case as far as them sitting down talking to us directly. And we heard their side of it, because they said, we believe as Christians that God chose the people of Israel and gave them the promised land. The PLO looked us right now and said God didn't have no right to give nobody no land because it was ours first.
Right, right. That's what they believe.
Yeah, he had no right to give no land to nobody. So, understanding both sides of the story, if there's going, I'm one that don't believe there's going to ever be peace in the Middle East because of what I've seen and what the man told me to my face.
Right.
But if these college students are getting involved in something that they really don't even have the backstory or the understanding of it, they're trying to get educated, and it's okay to protest peacefully. I'll support anybody to protest. I'll support Jeffrey Dahmer to protest people from his prison. And you know what he did.
Right.
But the way they're doing it now, they need to calm down, and they need to talk and meet with somebody that has some wisdom. Right now, it's foolishness, and it's just causing chaos across our country, and it needs to be stopped, even if you have to put the military people in there and say, listen, this is it. It stops. This is Friday, or whatever date it is. It stops today. And that's the end of it. And start over the right way.
Well, that is certainly great wisdom, and I want to thank you, Reverend Willoughby, for joining me today for some real talk, and we'll certainly talk again soon. I'm Reverend Charles Harrison, and this has been Real Talk. Join me next time as I bring more real talk about the real issues that affect our communities here in Indianapolis and across the country. Be sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast and share it on Facebook and Twitter. I want to thank you so much for joining me today on Real Talk.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.